Yeah, so there were reports coming out a few days ago that the Trump administration was actually considering including a small tax hike in their overall tax cut plan to offset some of the lost revenue. Because as much as these people claim we care about the debt, their tax bills always, skyrocket the deficit, which then adds a lot more to our debt. And there's a whole entire frame of reference I can go down there in terms of their economic policy sucking. But the idea was that initially with Trump's tax plan, he lowered the top income rate from 39.6% to 37%. His idea this time was, what if we create a new tax bracket for income over 2.5 million, and then on that new higher tax bracket, the rate is 39.6%, which would still bring in way less revenue than the pre-Trump tax cut rates because the 39.6 started at a lower income level previously. But I was like, you know what? That's like, if you're gonna give me a shit sandwich and put a little piece of whipped cream on it, I guess that is kind of preferable than just the shit sandwich by itself. But then, of course, the actual Republican tax plan comes out, and this tiny tax hike on the wealthy is nowhere to be seen, which is ridiculous because increasing the top marginal tax rate to 39.6% from 37% and only having it apply to income over 2.5 million doesn't really hurt anyone very much. Like the people that are making $2.5 million in ordinary income, if they're paying an extra few $1,000s, like are they really getting affected by this? And the benefit of that would be, okay, you are paying down the deficit a little bit more, which is better. But I think it just goes to show this fake populism from Trump because
Yep.
when it actually comes down to the economic issues, to any of these issues, he's going to frame himself as like, I'm fighting for the working class, I'm fighting for the average person. But then the bulk of his tax cut is going to corporations and high earners and people that are making a lot of their money from capital gains. So it's just frustrating to me that he is able to paint himself as like this, I'm fighting for every man and I'm fighting for lower prices when everything from his tariffs to his tax plan is regressive. It hurts the working class and it helps sort of the upper class. And I'm not someone who's like, I hate rich people and I hate businesses, but like the president's job is to fight for the majority of the American public. And it just is a logistical issue that if you want to do big things with government, you have to pay for that somehow. They always ask, how are you going to pay for it? You pay for it by raising taxes on corporations, on capital gains, and on income. That's just the obvious answer.
Yep. And you know, I showed the article saying that he wanted to potentially raise tax on the rich. Of course, you linked to me, not just that, you linked to me this. Republicans float new tax breaks for tips, local taxes in Trump budget. Trump is a talker. You know, Trump, he talks. He's a yapper. It's what he's good at.
Yeah.
But he's gonna cut taxes for the rich. What do we fucking do? Like he's just gonna do it no matter what he says. You know, there's some talk about him like breaking with Netanyahu because I guess he's slightly annoyed with him and they're not talking as much or whatever. But at the end of the day, with Donald Trump, what people need to understand is while he is erratic, while he'll say a thing that might sound good sometimes, he at the end of the day belongs to capital. The people that donated to him are not just going to let him break up with Israel, are not just going to let him raise their taxes. Marianne Adelson and her dead husband, they didn't give him hundreds of millions of dollars for nothing. And they will get the results that they want. With this tax break, I mean, he gets to enjoy the headlines for like a moment, that he's interested in raising taxes for the rich. Maybe there's some schmuck that's still like, oh, wow, it looks like he's fighting for me. But then, you know, at the end of the day, he's going to disappoint. This new...
The funny thing about his tax plan, to me, is like, Republicans always say, specifically when they're cutting corporate tax rates, that like, if we cut corporate tax rates, they're going to take that money and they're going to invest it into capital and into wages. And it's so funny because people, I mean, I wish people just understood how taxes worked. Like corporate taxes apply to corporate profits, not like their revenues. Like the revenues when they come in and they're divvying up what's going to wages, what's going to capital. Wages and capital investment are tax deductible. Like they don't pay taxes on those things. So the idea that they're going to take increased profits and use them in that way is not really borne out by the data we have. But what's funnier is this is the same guy pushing for tariffs, and
Yep.
tariffs actually do tax the
Yep.
revenue and the production side of a company. So it's funny, he's like, I want businesses to invest more in their workers and their capital, but then the tax plan he's pushing is like, no, 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 let them keep more of their profits, but then make it more expensive for them to hire people and buy materials with the tariffs, which is like, it's just so funny how their entire economic thesis of like, we want businesses to invest more. Okay, that might be good in a certain sense, but then why are you making it harder for them to actually invest by people
Yep.
don't talk about this. 1/3 of the materials that are used in our domestic manufacturing are imported materials.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think we're going
Mm-hmm.
to have more or less made in America products when all these made in America companies now are paying more for their imported materials? No, we saw in his
Yep.
first term, they fire people, they raise prices, and they produce less. But then, oh, don't worry, Trump's going to come in and give a tax break to the shareholders and the people that get the profits after all the expenses are divvied up. So that to me is just such a blatant exposure of the fact that like if you want to steelman their position of like they actually do want more business investment. No, they don't, because what they're
Yep.
actually doing kills business investment and just raises profits, which who does that actually help?
Yeah, no, it's a corporate tax is one of those things where people will often like bring up and they'll argue, well, you can't raise corporate taxes because that's going to make everything more expensive. You need to cut corporate taxes and that will make things cheaper, but then things don't get cheaper. So then it makes me wonder, well, if we raise it, I feel like we could raise it a little bit and the effects will not be that dramatic. Frankly, we should raise it at least to Obama era levels because Obama was honestly a very moderate guy economically. But moving from that point, what you said about the manufacturing and the overall Republican approach to the economy and the Trump approach to the economy is so important because people got to get this myth outside their head that the Republican Party is just, maybe they're mean and rough around the edges, but it's a mean old man that'll take care of my wallet. No, they won't. They've never been good at the economy. Even on the surface level, Democrats always have better economic performance. Even the most centrist Democrat does better than the average Republican. Donald Trump is honestly the best example. The tariffs are going to make manufacturing more expensive. It's going to make construction of factories more expensive. It's
Building
going
new
to
homes. Yep.
building new homes more expensive. And we try to communicate this with these Republicans, like the regular voters, the people that call in. Though I think the people that will call in are often the most extreme of
Sure.
MAGA, to be honest. They cannot get it through their skulls that this is a tax increase on them. There was that study that showed 95% of Americans will be seeing a tax increase. They factored in both the tax plan baseline, but also like the tariffs, because tariffs are taxes. And 95% of Americans are going to see cost increase, while the top 5% are going to see cost decrease. This is not only just stupid overall, but it's going to increase already existing problems of inequality. And inequality is one of those things that drives increased prices. For example, in terms of housing, if you live in, say, South Florida, like I do, it's a very desired place to come. A lot of rich people want to come here. People don't know this actually, but like the bigger counties in South Florida are actually losing overall population. Well, then you would think, well, why is it that prices are still going up here? Well, if you're looking at Miami specifically, if there's a bunch of rich people that want to live in Miami for whatever the reason might be, then landlords, developers, whoever know they can put these ridiculous prices and these rich people will be able to afford it. And the poor people and working people that have been living there, well, they're just priced out. And those are the people that have been leaving South Florida, even though our prices have still been going up. So inequality at itself is a driver of high cost overall. And this 95%, top 5% tax break, whatever, it's going to exacerbate every problem that everybody's been complaining about for like frankly, the last few decades, but particularly this inflation problem that was happening under Biden that he kind of put under control. It's gonna look like nothing in the next few years.
Yeah, and like even with like housing, for example, like Republicans are supposed to be the supply side people, but then
Yeah.
the tariffs actually make it harder to increase the supply of housing, which
Yeah.
just from an economic perspective, there's many reasons housing is expensive in the U.S. There's many variables there,
Yeah.
but the primary reason, as far as I can tell, is that we just don't build enough homes.
Yeah.
If you look
Yeah.
at places where they build more homes, I think it was Austin, Texas, one of the
Yep.
only places in the country where average rents actually went down over time, and now
Really?
to the point where like these apartment complexes are begging people to live there with like, hey, your first 2 months of rent are going to be free. Like all these offers, which only happen when people have to actually compete. And when you have, like you're
Yes.
saying, like limited supply, then it's going to be the wealthiest people that are able to
Yep.
afford that limited supply. And then it's in their interest to not build more supply because they want their property values to go up, which is another reason that the Yimbys versus the NIMBYs thing is happening, is
Yep.
because there is some of this tension here where it's like, okay, if you're a homeowner, you actually don't want housing to get cheaper because
Yep.
that's an asset that you own. And then
Yeah.
if you're a congressional member from like a very suburban area, maybe it's hard for you to come back and tell your constituents, hey, I'm going to pass legislation that's going to make your homes worth less. Maybe that is like a tough political battle to win, which Democrats need to figure out how to message on that and how to figure that out. But then even more broadly with like when we talk about things like tariffs and inequality, it's just so ridiculous because you said it like amazingly. Like Republicans are always framed as like, we understand economics, like we're the big boys when it comes to economics. These silly Dems just want to tax and spend you into oblivion. But then anyone who actually studies economics, I feel like, and maybe I'm biased because I went to maybe a more left-leaning campus in Ann Arbor in Michigan, but like
Mm-hmm.
one of the first things you learn in macroeconomics is that government spending is more economically stimulative than tax cuts. When you cut
Yep.
taxes, you don't know how many of those dollars are actually going to be spent in the economy because some of
Yep.
those dollars, especially on the wealthier quintiles, they save that money. They might
Yep.
invest that money. They're not going to spend as much. Tax cuts do stimulate when you cut taxes for the working class and the middle class because they actually spend that money on childcare and groceries or eating out or seeing the movies, whatever. When you
Yeah.
cut taxes for the wealthy, they might invest in certain things or save a certain amount, and that might be good to a certain extent. But if you increase taxes, you pay down the deficit, you pay down the debt, and then if you spend those tax dollars to build roads and bridges and ports, that stimulates the economy a
Yep.
lot more by sometimes a factor of 200% more than cutting corporate
I
taxes.
believe
In
that.
fact, little fun fact from economics, there's this thing called the multiplier, which is for every dollar you spend, how much economic growth do you get out of that? How much GDP growth do you get out of that? And the thing that has the lowest multiplier is corporate tax cuts. I think the multiplier is like 0.1, which is like for every dollar you cut in corporate taxes, you maybe get 10 cents of economic growth. When you look at
Yeah.
infrastructure, the multiplier sometimes is like 2.5, meaning for every
Yeah.
$1 you spend on roads, bridges, and ports, you get $2.50 of economic growth. So
Yeah.
Democrats need to reclaim we are the sensible ones when it comes to the
Yes.
economy. We are the ones who are going to make the wealthy pay more in taxes to pay down our debt and then use that money
Yep.
to fund education and roads and bridges and make your life easier as the average person. And then also, if you have a better educated workforce, that is also good for these businesses to have better educated employees. And then if you have things like stronger unions, then
Yep.
worker satisfaction goes up, productivity goes up. When workers are
Mm-hmm.
treated like people and not like cogs in a machine, um, like you actually get better economic growth. And like Democrats need to point out, hey, we ran the Republican experiment. Before FDR came in, we
Yep.
had this laissez-faire free market capitalism, and what did it get us? Without the FDA, we had meat and produce with parasites in it that was killing people. Without
Mm-hmm.
the NLRB and unions existing, you had situations where people were working 7 days a week, like 10 hours a day. They're in a factory, the door is locked, they can't even leave. And there was this incident where I believe a factory caught on fire.
Yep.
And because these workers were locked into the factory, they all died. So
Yep.
having things like workers' rights is actually good for the economy. It
Mm-hmm.
improves productivity. It improves quality of life. It brings in more tax revenue. And Democrats need to be able to say, hey, when they talk about we're going to make businesses more free, we're going to cut taxes, it's going to be great, we're going to cut regulation. We have a case study for that. And it led to the Great Depression.
Yep. Yep. And I guess, like you said, this goes back to messaging that we were talking about in the previous story.
Yeah.
If we need a Democrat that can message, I guess, in the political climate that we've been in for the last 40 years, these very progressive ideas, which I don't think are, I think they're just reasonable. I think historically
They should be framed that way, especially.
They should especially be framed that way. I think if we were talking about what we're talking about in the mid 20th century, I don't know if our, ethnic origins would be an issue too. We're discussing it too.
Probably.
But we would be discussing pretty commonly accepted things. I mean,
Yeah.
college was free in California until Reagan was governor. And they specifically fucked it up. It's in writing. They wanted to prevent an educated proletariat. That's not me trying to drop the buzzwords. That's what they wanted to prevent. When it comes to inequality, the insane inequality that we have today is just not sustainable. It's like building a house with no foundation and making sure that house is built upside down. It's the dumbest fucking thing in the world. And it amazes me when talking about this issue, when you talk about, say, like Kamala's plan to tax unrealized capital gains above $100 million. That affects...
I hated that plan.
You hated that plan?
I hated that plan, but sorry, go ahead.
Why'd you hate that plan? Wait, why'd you hate that plan?
I think taxing unrealized gains is just it's economic suicide. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, let's say that you have a case like Elon Musk, where like he owns the vast majority of shares for a company. And then you say, okay, when we're taxing someone, let's say that the rate is 20%. You have to first calculate on the day you're taxing them, how much is the stock worth? How many shares do you have? Multiply that by 0.2. But then as he has to start selling those shares to pay the tax, the share price starts to fall. But then the tax basis you put that 20% on also starts to fall. So the amount that he owes goes down. And it just creates, like, our capital markets would be fucked by this. This is one thing where maybe this is like a hot take in like more left-leaning circles, progressive circles. I think taxing unrealized gains is a horrible, atrocious idea. It would never have passed in Congress. And I think that like there's much better ways to bring in revenue. I would say increase the rates on long-term capital gains, create more brackets for income, raise those rates, increase corporate tax rates, maybe tax like luxury goods at a higher rate. There's things you can do that I think are a lot more simple, just logistically. And this is why like there's been many European countries that tried taxing unrealized gains. And I think like 8 out of 10 of them stopped because they were like, this is really fucking difficult to do, like logistically speaking. So that's one thing where, sorry to cut off your train of thought there, but
no,
I
it's
just
fine. It's fine.
That's one thing where my inner like economics major comes out and I'm like, no, like I don't like that.
This is my question here. I guess I do think people's perspectives on taxation need to change a bit. I think that change is occurring. Taxation to me is, even though yes, it is partly raising revenue. Obviously, you need to, if you want to do some progressive program, you need to raise revenue. You need to raise taxes, particularly on the rich. But I think also it is a tool to literally take money away from these rich people. But I think what you're saying is that there are better ways to do that, no matter what the goal is, whether it's raising revenues or trying to deal with inequality.
Yeah, I also view it a little bit differently, where I would say like, my main goal with taxation and government redistribution, economic policy regulation is like, I think the main focus is raising the floor. And if that means lowering the ceiling to add more to the floor, then sure. But like, I don't go into it with and maybe we have a difference of opinion on this. I don't go into it thinking like, I want to go after the rich people. I just more so think like, if we want to help bring the floor much higher, we just as a logistical thing have to tax the wealthy. We just that's where the money is at. So like, I don't view it in the same moral terms where like, and we might disagree on this, where like when people say like a billionaire shouldn't exist, I'm kind of agnostic on that as long as the working class and middle class have all of their basic needs met. If they have all their needs met and some billionaires still exist, and like I don't personally really care very much, but then if we have to tax so much that billionaires stop existing to help the working class, that's fine with me too. But like, I don't approach it from, and this is why I don't really call myself a leftist and I call myself more of a progressive. I don't approach it from like this class first mentality as much
Yeah.
as like, to me, this is all just like, what do we plug into the equation to get the highest number for working class people? Like, what do we tweak in the economy? What rates do we put in? How do we structure things such that we are able to, like, my ultimate goal is like, you know, another hot take of mine, which might make you sound like a neo-lib. I am not a huge fan of minimum wage increases. I would much rather have unions be strong as fuck. Like, put in a lot of effort
Well, that's
into like.
in Denmark. That's what they have over there.
Exactly. They do it great, where it's like that way you have flexibility sector by sector, and you're not doing this one size fits all approach. In some states, the cost of living is vastly different. So having a federal minimum wage, I think, can cause issues because 15 is not enough in California, and maybe
Yeah.
in like Kansas, it's like maybe a little bit too much. I don't know if that's the case, but like I think
Yeah.
unions and worker rights are the most important thing to me. I think 4-day work week is super based. I think increasing union membership is super based. But then when it comes to more like
4-day work week makes sense because it literally increases productivity and makes the
yes,
people
and I
happier.
think it would be insanely politically popular. Like that would be such a winning issue, especially when you frame it as, hey, this makes you more productive. When you have a
Yeah.
3-day weekend coming up, you have a lot more energy to give to your work for those 4 days where
Yes.
you are working.
Yep.
And then if you have a union with you, your employer cannot extort your desperation to pay you starvation wages. And I think
Yep.
that is like a much better avenue to go down than the taxing unrealized gains, high minimum wage path. I think you can still get political wins that way, but my inner economist comes out and starts going
Yeah.
crazy when I hear those things. So
I think that's fair to say. I think my approach with I'm very class oriented. I would still say I'm a social democrat, so I'm still fundamentally a capitalist. It's just
yeah,
I view wealth not just as money but as power. It's just because just looking at how the political process.
Yeah.
If you're a rich person and you can have a super PAC, you can put essentially infinite amount of money in there, and you could buy not just one city, mid-sized city, small city, whatever. You can buy practically every city in the county if you really wanted to. Elon Musk could buy all the cities around me and probably around you if his determination or his focus wasn't the president. He could it's wealth is so impactful that I'm not necessarily like millionaires shouldn't exist per se. I do agree with you that like the priority when it comes to the economics is lifting people up and making sure that their quality of life is better. And if that requires bringing down the ceiling a little bit, that's perfectly fine with me. I agree with you on the economic terms. I think in the broader political project, it's not so much punishment as it is practical balancing. You know what I mean? Looking at this like a game of Victoria 3. I don't know. You have to there is certain groups in Victoria 3. It's usually the landlords or the landowners or the capitalist class that you just need to make sure that their clout, their power does not overwhelm the laborers or the farmers and so on and so forth. I'm talking like a fucking nerd. You're talking about a game. But like that I think Loki, I know that Mason, One Hand Politics, he's played Victoria 3, so he probably gets what I'm saying.
We should get him on here actually at some point.
Yeah, he could be the first guest. He would be a great first guest. But we need to not necessarily just distribute wealth. We need to redistribute power. And, it doesn't have to be unrealized capital gains. It could be tax on luxury goods. I think, for example, there's some practical little taxes here and there that would make a big impact. Bernie's college plan costs around $60 billion, $60 to $80 billion. It's kind of been a few years. Yeah. 60 to 80. And I mean, we could honestly pay for that with
that's like
deficit spending. We could literally just deficit spend that, and it's like if we're not going to feel it. But he proposed a plan to do like this tiny little percentage on capital gains, not unrealized capital gains, proper capital gains, little percentage, and it would have covered everything. It's such like a easy to do thing as well. We have That's why I'm so like gun ho with Tim Walz 2028. Again, we're gonna talk about 2028 eventually in a much bigger thing. But I'll just say this: I think with Tim Walz, he has such experience that nobody I can't think of any other politician has. Like, I'm not trying to overhype him. It's just he has legislative experience where he was correct on a lot of the issues, particularly domestic foreign policy. He was against the Wall Street bailouts too, so that's domestic policy. As he has executive experience as governor, where he did a laundry list of great policies. So, you know,
congressional experience as well.
Yep, congressional experience, executive experience, and just he's done it. He did it, and he did it with 1 seat majority. If we just have Democrats be like, for example, with the College for All plan, this is an easy W. Why the fuck are we not taking it?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And like, I would just add, like, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna finish. We can finish off this segment with what you got to say, because this segment's also been going on kind of long.
Okay, yeah. So I was gonna say, like, I actually agree with you that, like, when you talked about trying to balance the power dynamics between people that own a lot of capital and people that are more so laborers, I think unions are the best way to do that, because the entire issue, and this is why people talk about, like, well, the employers are going to pay their employees well because of competition and market forces. That's not true, because the employer has a lot more leverage over one employee than the employee has over the employer. And the entire point of a union is to say, okay, maybe as one employee, I have a lot less leverage and a lot less say than the guy who employs me, because he has all the capital. But if all of the employees are together as one unit, then there's more of a balance between the capital owner and the laborers that work in that. And then I think there should be a healthy balance, a healthy push and pull between the union and the employer. And currently in our economy, in most sectors, the capital owner and the employer has a lot more of that market power than the employees have, which can be ameliorated if those employees are able to collectively bargain. And I think the same thing applies to the impact of money on legislation. When a lot of people talk, and it's important to understand, like, how specifically does money impact politics? And I think one thing people don't talk about is, like, it's not like these lobbyists walk in and they're like, hey, we want you to hurt the poor people and help the rich people. Here's the money. It's more so like, okay, we're writing this long ass piece of legislation with like thousands of pages, and the average person is not paying attention to page 18, subsection 4, section C. Like, they're not looking at that. But these lobbyists, they are looking at that. They have the money and time to come in and say, hey, when you guys are drafting the zoning requirements for this specific city, we want you guys to use our preferred contract or whatever. It's like these specific places where they have so much unchallenged power, because there is no public representative coming in to push back and say, okay, that's what the capital owners want. Here's what the average person wants. There's like no competition to even have like someone to push back against them. So I think a lot of fixing our economy comes down to saying, like, we need to have a balance. There needs to be the working class. They need to have more of a stake or more of a place in the game to push back against just these pure capital owners who are never going to be considering the worries and the cares and the quality of life of the other 200, 300 million people that are actually affected by the policy. So,
100%
that's
agree.
I think the balance is important.
I can say this confidently, that if we were writing the tax plan, it'd be better than Trump's. Okay, we're going to end that.